How would you prepare for a career in a mysterious industry like theme park design, where information about job requirements in current projects are almost impossible to find? And what would you do if you were stuck in a desert, literal and creative, with little more than a stack of comics, an Imagineering book, and a school trip to Disneyland to guide you? Theme park concept artist Chris Bradley is here to share how he went from working construction to designing theme park attractions for Disney Imagineering, 20th Century Fox, and Hasbro. You'll also get to hear how Chris thinks when he visits a theme park and learn about his favorite theme park attractions. And at the end of the interview, he shares some challenging advice for aspiring theme park concept artists. Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Oatley Academy ArtCast. I'm Chris Oatley, director of the Oatley Academy and your host. Recently, I've been sharing some unique and useful visual storytelling resources on Instagram. There's a new tutorial that will help you avoid cliche character designs, and I'm almost done with one that will help you make your stories more timeless. Oh, and I'm also doing some awesome giveaways over there. Next up is an Etcher Field case. Just go to chrisoatley.com/IG. That's chrisoatley.com/IG, as in Instagram. Click follow and turn on post notifications to get those free resources and more. Now here's my interview with theme park concept artist Chris Bradley. Bradley, if you could, just start with your specific role.
So my job is concept artist. Clients come to me when they've got the tiniest little shreds of an idea, and my job is to sort of expand upon that. And that ranges from quick ideation sketches to full-on POV paintings. My sort of secondary role is to make what they call marketing art. So that's the big splashy renderings that occasionally get released to the public. Very rarely am I tasked with just go to your desk and make a cool painting of something and we don't know what it is yet and come back to us. Let's say you take an assignment from school and you add 15 different rules on top of what you'd normally get, right? It's we don't have the money for this. We can only go this tall. There's a giant apartment complex behind it, so we kind of have to hide that. It's got to be viewable from 10 different angles. It's got to look good, and we got to put 7,000 people a day through it. Right, and then there's new rules that come along as the project moves along because you're just a small piece, and so there's larger teams that are also working on other aspects of this project. So then halfway through your ideation process, they're like, oh, by the way, we're cutting off a third of your square footage. How do you cram what you've already got into a smaller space? And on top of all of that, it's got to tell a story.
Let's jump back. Your family is very practical and yet very affectionate, right? There's that kind of practicality, that kind of mechanical fascination that I think was inspired and nurtured in your family environment in a lot of ways, and then later in your first career. And then there's also this thread of, the magic of the parks. With that in mind, where's a good place to start?
I think the practicality that you're talking about, that's sort of ingrained in me, stems from my dad. Mm-hmm. He was a 20-year Navy veteran, was a chief in the Navy, drill instructor, mechanic. So I was trained from a very young age to get shit done, mm-hmm. Right? And we, no matter what the task was that we had, it was a task and we had to complete it. So I definitely approach things being influenced by his ultimate practicality and the way he sort of lived his life in terms of, this is our list of things that we have to do. This is why we have to do them. And we're going to start right now. And we're going to keep going until they're done. And in the same vein, we did have plenty of time for playing and not being very serious and joking around. And he was very much like that. He could get everything done and sort of goof off at the same time. Mm-hmm. And for me, theme park design is sort of a perfect fit in a way, in that we have to do this correctly. Otherwise, what we've designed is useless. So, yeah, I bring a lot of what he taught me and my brother to the table. Without the practical, there is no fun.
And how about your early art influences and practices?
Oh, man. So when I was a kid, I drew all the time. I was drawing as far back as I can remember. And I was heavily influenced by all the comic book artists of the 90s, Todd McFarlane, Jim Lee, and Rob Liefeld. And I drew for fun. I drew because I enjoyed doing it. And it was frustrating. I remember always being frustrated that it wasn't as good as Todd McFarlane's drawings. And it never dawned on me, I'm 11 and he's been through art school and he's in his 20s or 30s and he's done 20,000 hours of this stuff before he got the Spider-Man job. In my head as a kid, if you're drawing a picture of Spider-Man, it's supposed to look like the one on the comic book cover. Mm-hmm. If it doesn't quite look like the one on the comic book cover, then you didn't quite succeed. And so you keep pushing and you keep trying. My parents enrolled me in classes through Parks and Rec department in my hometown of Tucson, Arizona. So I was going and taking drawing classes with hobbyists that were, retirees and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And I was the kid that was showing up to drawing class and learning how to draw still lifes and whatnot. And then the other thing I glommed onto as a kid was painting miniatures. I had no interest in role-playing games, really. But the little tiny figurines that you could then paint, man, that just lit my brain up real good.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. I had the same problem with that, too. I would go into the hobby shop and would go in and pick out the coolest little sculptures I could find and get all the paints and take it home. And then it would just look horrible. I mean, it was just a disaster. And I would take them back into the guy at the hobby shop and be like, now tell me what I did wrong. And have this man walk me through how he painted those little miniatures. And then I would go and try it again and over and over and over again, still not putting together why my 10 minutes on the job wasn't as good as these guys who had been doing it for hours and hours and hours.
You experienced frustration, but not defeat.
No, I never thought to stop. In fact, there was a moment in my childhood when I was feeling particularly rebellious, and I told my dad, I'm not going to go into the Navy. And he said to me, 20-year Navy vet, cigar, speaks like a Navy chief. He said to me, "You'd better not. I went in so that you don't have to. You had better keep drawing and keep painting, because that's what you're really good at." I remember that as clear as a bell. He felt like I should keep going in that direction, and I have. I just always have. I've never thought to change paths.
When you look back on the many trips to Disneyland that you took as a kid and growing up, can you find the genesis of your passion for being a theme park designer?
The trips themselves, to me, are the genesis of it. When I was a little kid, I first realized, adults built this and had fun and used their imagination and built something that was creative. And so I got permission to continue being creative throughout my life. Permission to keep pursuing fun, and you can build things that other people will have fun with. And then there were trips in middle school when we got good grades or whatever. They would put all of us on a bus at 10 o'clock at night, drive through the night, and arrive at the gates of Disneyland when they open. And they would offload us off the bus, and you could go into Disneyland and just be free, just roam free in Disneyland. The only rule being you had to be back at the gate at park close at midnight. So here's me and all of my little friends for our first taste of unsupervised playtime. And we got 16 hours of unsupervised playtime in the happiest place on earth. And then later on in life, road trips with my buddies, and we would go up California coast, and we'd always make a day to stop at the theme parks and have a good time and goof around. And by that point, I'm seriously studying art. I'm pushing on my skills and drawing, not for fun, but with the intent on getting better, right? Practicing instead of playing. And so going with my buddies and goofing around in the theme parks would reinforce that, would keep me going, would keep me pushing, because there's something out there that you can do with these skills, right? It's not just goofing off. It's not an unserious pursuit. And then when I was 17, my dad passed, and it was really tough on my family. Life was not super great right then. Once things had calmed down and once life had sort of found something of a new normal, my mom wanted to just get out and go on vacation. And so the best thing we could do would be to go somewhere that gave us permission to not worry about all of it. And so we went to Disney World. We flew all the way across the country. We could have gone anywhere on the planet, but we went to a place that was safe, and yet we could also escape. And we had a blast. And that sort of cemented it all. All of the criticisms of Disneyland are fair, I guess. Mm-hmm. But it is a place where magic happens. And it doesn't necessarily happen because of what they built, but it happens because of what you bring to it.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. The interactions between the people within this magical environment are what the whole point of this art form is about.
Yeah,
right?
And that was the case for Walt, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the two-part American Experience documentary on Walt Disney that PBS did, I mean, they make that really clear about why he invented this. The context of him and his relationship to his own animation studio, which at that point had become a behemoth, and his relationship to the people that work for him, and the troubles of all of that, and why he stepped out to build a Disneyland was, to get away. He built it in large part to get away from the chaos of life. We create these spaces, we create these experiences that give people permission to let everything go and have a good time.
Yeah, the best perk of working for the Walt Disney Company, I believe, is the Silver Pass, which is, essentially unlimited Disneyland. My friend Andy, my friend James, and I were always there. I remember we would talk about the Disneyland hangover, and that had nothing to do with alcohol and
right.
and everything to do with the sort of plunge back into reality that happens the following day after you've spent the day at Disneyland. It's amazing because it makes me appreciate that sort of magical park experience, even more, because it is it is so completely immersive. There really is something that, as much of a marketing message as political as it is, can only be described as magic.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Was there a point where you started thinking about how it works? Or was that always there? Was there some sort of epiphany moment?
I think I was always paying attention to it a little bit. And then it's sort of, as I continued to visit and as I continued to make this a profession, or at least push towards making this a profession, I paid attention to how it works, why it works a little bit more. I think the closest thing to an epiphany I had, I was riding Pirates of the Caribbean, and you're in the middle of this battle, right, between the pirate ship and the fortress, right? There's robots yelling at you, and it's water splashing everywhere. And I had ridden the ride a bunch of times by then, and over the course of my life.
How old were you?
Late high school, early college, somewhere in there. And I realized, because I no longer had to pay attention to the story, I realized I don't know where I am. Like, if I had to climb out of this boat and wade through the water and get to my car, I don't know where to go. And so I thought about it, right? And I've thought about it every day since. Is like, if you go and you park in the parking lot at Disneyland, and your whole mission is to just get on Pirates of the Caribbean, and you walk from your car, and you go down and you get in line, you get on the tram, you take the tram over, and then you're in downtown Disney, and then go through security, in through the main gate, and down Main Street, and then you hang a left and you go through Adventureland, and then you're through Adventureland, and then you're in New Orleans Square, and then you got to go under a bridge. The number of thresholds along the way you can just sort of count all the things that have to be done to transport you to someplace completely different from your normal life. Before, you're on a boat in the middle of the ocean between a pirate ship and a fortress, and they're shooting cannons at each other. And ultimately, I think you're closer to your car when you're in the middle of the Pirates of the Caribbean than you are when you're on the tram, or than you are when you're in downtown Disney. So they have made you go on the journey. And so I think that's the moment that I realized that how all of this works is as interesting to me as the story that it's telling. And that has come in handy for me professionally, because a lot of times now, the story that we're trying to tell has already been decided on the movie screen. I would say 70% of the work I do is related to an IP that was created by somebody else that we have to add on to and adapt, and yet still keep the core of what makes that IP special. Being interested in both aspects of it has made my professional life a lot easier than if I was just interested in what story we're trying to tell.
And so was it then that you knew you wanted to work in theme parks, or did that come later?
I guess I had always known that I wanted to work in theme parks, but I didn't know for sure. There was that time, when you're right around 14, 15, 16, when they make you think about this, like, what do I want to do with my life? And that book, I think it's called Imagineering Behind the Magic. I had been given that book for Christmas, and in there they list off all of the professions that are necessary to make one of these theme parks come to life. In there was illustrator. I was good at drawing and a little bit of painting, and I just thought, well, if Imagineering needs illustrators, I can be an illustrator. And so that's where I sort of connected the dots. And I made that decision when I was 16. Was like, yeah, okay, this is the industry I want to be in, and these are the skills I want to use to participate. And it was a decision that I made at 16 that I have stuck with all the way through. 20 plus years. And it's been a long journey. And I have not been in this industry terribly long. In many ways, it's still very new to me, because my journey to get here was a long and winding road.
The first job did not come right away.
No. No, it did not.
You found your way into construction even, and that's fascinating to me.
Yeah. Construction was a complete accident. It was really a lesson in plate spinning. I think I built close to 30 office, retail, and restaurant spaces. And all the while I was doing that, I was going to Tuesday night figure drawing at the Pima Community College. This was just before the internet had become the repository for all the drawing lessons that you could potentially need. It was everybody that was teaching drawing at a high level was putting a little bit of stuff online in forums and whatnot. And I was glomming onto that stuff and taking it with me to Tuesday night figure drawing class at the community college, and working on my craft and continuing to keep going in that direction. Mm-hmm. Every day I'm grateful for that experience in construction, because the understanding of what really building something entails informs all of my drawing. So matters of scale and budget, right? I mean, just the fact that you draw it so that it's at an achievable height. I can't tell you how many clients roll in and they want something that's 500 feet tall.
Yeah.
And I don't think that there's anything in any theme park anywhere that's 500 feet tall.
Right.
And I don't think that, the world's largest media company has a budget to build something in a theme park that's 500 feet tall. So understanding that we've got to make these spaces function at a human scale with a big but manageable budget is something that I learned outside of concept design and drawing and painting. It's something that I learned from working with people in the field. A lot of theme park design isn't designing the rides. A lot of theme park design is designing the restaurant or the retail space, right? If you've built restaurants before and you've built stores before, you know that where your cash wrap desk sits is pretty important. And we can't just decide to put it anywhere we want, because it serves a bunch of different functions. they serve a flow function. If you put your cash wrap in the wrong spot, you clog up your whole store and people can't move around in it. Well, my construction experience is as much about how things are built as it is how things function and serve the purpose that they set out to do.
So you made it to San Diego.
Right when everybody in my sort of peer group was buying houses, I went back to school. I went to San Diego to study at the Watts Atelier, and that is what I had felt I had been missing from my university education. And so I signed up for classes, and I did a deep dive on hardcore drawing and painting fundamentals.
Yeah.
What is it about making a 2D picture of a 3D object? How does that illusion work? I dove in hard on that. It was at that point that I really had started to own my own education, taking online courses, learning digital painting. I was also constantly keeping an eye on how to get to theme park design, right?
Right.
I would roll up to the D23 conventions, the Disney conventions that they have up here at the Anaheim Convention Center. And I went to the first D23 convention because I knew that they had advertised that they were going to have this big, Imagineering pavilion. I wanted to go see it. At that time, they had the Imagineers of all different stripes standing next to the exhibits and explaining them. So I went around to every exhibit and I talked to every Imagineer. Mm-hmm. What do you do? What have you been working on lately? What's the most important part of your job? What are the core parts of this job? I was putting together in my head, like, okay, what do I need to be able to do? What skill sets do I need to have to be useful to these people? And I met Marty Sklar, which was weird because he was just walking through. Like, I'm standing there talking to an Imagineer, and then Marty Sklar rolls by, and it was like, I had my little geek out moment for a second. And I was in the middle of talking with an Imagineer, and it was a very brief interaction with Marty, and then I went back to talking to this guy, and I said, I apologized, and I was like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, I derailed our conversation with that. That was just my fanboy moment. And he just looks at me and goes, yeah, it's okay, we all do that.
That's awesome.
It was so you sort of realize that a lot of these guys that work on theme parks are also fans.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
So after D23, I really honed in on what it is that I needed to do, and I needed stories. I could paint, I could build stuff, or at least I knew how stuff got built. I was trying to find the connective tissue, and that's when I found you and the Oatley Academy. I found the painting drama pitch that you had up on the internet. I read through it and was sold. I was ready to go. Painting drama happened in my life right at a critical moment. I was on this long journey. At this point, 10 years removed from my first attempt at LA, and my first attempt at trying to get into this industry, and I'm clinging to this idea that I can still do this. I've attained all these skills, but it's a mess. And how do I organize it? And that, for me, is what I took away from painting drama, was how to organize all of this stuff into a functional model, a working model of storytelling. If it wasn't for painting drama, I wouldn't be able to make the type of decisions that are applicable to my medium.
Right.
So telling a story with a structure that has to function and obey a lot of building rules is really challenging if you don't know what the story is you're trying to tell. Otherwise, you're just drawing shapes. You're just drawing shapes on the page and hoping that the shapes work out. And I know some people that draw great shapes. They draw fantastic shapes, and they're beautiful shapes. But if it doesn't mean anything, ultimately it's ephemeral. And it wasn't until I got to painting drama, and you had said to us that composition and the story are inextricably linked.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
One is meaningless without the other. It was the guiding philosophy that sort of took my overstuffed hobo bindle of experience and made it into a professional toolkit. So I took all of my stuff out of my hobo bindle and I put it in a briefcase, and I walked into an office and I appeared at least somewhat professional.
That's awesome.
Because that idea ended up becoming the connective tissue for all of the things that I'm able to bring to the table. Wow. Is we're doing this all in service of telling a good story.
So bring us up to present day, Bradley.
Once I had worked my way through your two classes and had infilled my portfolio with pieces that told a story in a compelling way, I was able to start taking that around and finding work in this industry. I felt like I had put together a presentation that people in the theme park world would hopefully respond to. There's an organization called the TEA, the Themed Entertainment Association, and they had started having what they call a Gib Gab, which is a sort of a lightning round meet and greet for people outside of the industry to jump in. And they had one on the East Coast, and they were having their first one here on the West Coast, and it was at Imagineering in 1401 Flower Street.
Awesome.
Which for fans is like Mecca, right? Mm-hmm. Rapid fire, there were 17 tables, and we had to take our portfolios around and introduce ourselves to all of these different companies. It wasn't just Disney and Universal. Those are the big names, but there was dozens of other smaller theme park design companies, essentially creative firms that are not unlike Imagineering, but for hire, because not every company that wants to get into theme parks or themed entertainment can set up their own Imagineering. So I practiced my elevator pitch. I went back and watched a bunch of Chris Oatley videos on elevator pitches and had to develop my elevator pitch for myself, because I was, I had 3 minutes with everybody, and I delivered that thing 17 times in a row. My portfolio went over really well with quite a few people, and I got a handful of opportunities from that one event that sort of laid the foundations for my career. I had started doing some freelance for Disney directly. So, I was doing illustrations for them from my home studio, which is a fantastic job. And I was also starting to pick up stuff from the smaller firms. And I had landed my first studio job at a smaller firm here in town. We were all working on this theme park, 20th Century Fox Dubai. And it went right out of the frying pan and into the fire. We went right into insane deadlines with crazy demands, and just pulling stuff together as quickly as possible so we can get it in front of the client and continue the dialogue. That's where I learned that the bulk of what I do continues a dialogue that's happening constantly. And lucky for me, I made a very good set of friends there. Some people like me who were changing careers, some mid-career professionals. We had a couple of senior pros and some kids right out of school. I had met some Imagineering veterans who started telling me, some stories about what WDI was like in the old days, and teaching me the craft and what to keep my focus on and what to let go for later. And we had all fit together really well. So when that project ended and we all sort of scattered to the wind, I had found myself suddenly, a year after going to this networking event where I knew nobody, a year later, I had a network. I just had this group of people who were now all at different places. So when that project wrapped up and I was out on my own again, I was able to pick up some more work illustrating ideas for Disney. And then shortly thereafter, I landed at the place where I work now, which is the Hedema Group in Pasadena, run by a gentleman named Phil Hedema, who just won our industry's Lifetime Achievement Award. Awesome. He's a genius. He really knows this world, and what he has built with his company is a safe space for a lot of people that had 25 years or more of Disney experience. A lot of people, they get to the 25-year mark, and for whatever reason, they end up leaving the Walt Disney Company, and a handful of the lucky ones ended up over in Pasadena working for Phil Hedema. And these guys have designed all the things that you have heard of. They all started right when Epcot Center was being built, all the way through to Tokyo Disney Sea, which is the crown jewel of theme parks worldwide. And so I'm super lucky in that I get to work alongside these men and women who have done the heavy lifting on some really phenomenal projects that got built. We have dozens of projects in the industry that don't get built, but these guys did stuff that actually got built. it's a great company to work for. Their breadth is outstanding. So I go to work every day making sketches and paintings alongside those guys, knowing that if I stumble on something that doesn't quite make sense to me or whatever, I can go pick the brains of somebody who's been doing this for a very long time and getting an education that I don't know if any other creative studio can provide that at this particular moment in time. It's a great profession to be in, but I also sort of think of it as part of the Frankensteining of my education. Like, oh,
right.
This is like the masterclass part where everybody in the building is good at their craft. And so, yeah, that's what I do is I get up and go to work every day and deal with all of it in the presence of giants. It's pretty fantastic.
What's your favorite park?
Disneyland, Anaheim, without a doubt.
Yeah, me too.
I have not been lucky enough to go around to see all of the ones around the globe. Mm-hmm. And so I know from a design standpoint that a bunch of the other ones are better thought out, better executed, had bigger budgets, whatever. But there's something about Disneyland, being that it's the first and being that it's landlocked, it can't sprawl out. And, it's got smaller, tighter experiences and make it different. It just makes it a little bit more magical than some of the other ones. In addition to my personal experiences there.
Yeah. What's your favorite food at the parks? Or restaurant?
Gosh, the coolest restaurant is the Blue Bayou, for sure. That's the Cajun food restaurant that's inside Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah, and you can see the boats go by.
Yeah, it's right next to the water in the Pirates of the Caribbean. That's a pretty solid achievement.
Yeah.
That's pretty remarkable. I think ultimately my favorite place to eat it's the Chinese food place in California Adventure, because they designed that thing to get as many people through there as possible.
Awesome. So it's the efficiency.
It's the efficiency of it, right? It's like they give you a thing of high quality food.
Yeah.
And they get it to you really quick. And then you go and you find a place to sit down and you're done. Yeah, it doesn't tell a story the same way Blue Bayou does, or Plaza Inn, or any of those things. And it doesn't have any of the iconic food choices, the Monte Cristo sandwich or any of those things. But when you're there and you are hungry and it is time to eat, getting your food and getting seated is very important.
What's your favorite photo op?
I think it's got to be the picture they take of you at the end of Space Mountain.
No, yeah.
Yeah. Because it's very easy to just sort of look windblown and like you're having fun or whatever. But when it's also like a flash in the middle of the dark and I put my glasses in my pocket so that they don't fall out on the ride, and I got this ridiculous beard, and I just look like a disaster every single time. And it's funny every single time.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, what's your favorite show or presentation, live event, parade?
It's actually not at a Disney park. I do really like the sort of interactive theater stuff. You go into Disney and you're greeted by this beautifully designed turn of the century Victorian architecture, and there's sometimes there's a marching band and there's a train, and you're transported back in time and this is a nice place and whatnot. So Disney has these big beautiful costumes and these great character actors in them that are performing, but you never hear them talk. Universal gets these guys who can dress up like Beetlejuice and harass you.
Yeah.
And then he'll come harass you for a picture, and you feel obligated to take a picture with this guy. Right? There's nothing quite like a guy dressed as Beetlejuice almost licking your neck while one of your coworkers takes your picture.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, that part to me is when the performers are bringing something to it themselves. That's what I like.
Okay, favorite ride.
Favorite ride. Pirates of the Caribbean is still one of the most entertaining things that you can do.
Yeah.
Right? And it's,
Yeah.
I think it's 50 years old this year. And yeah, they've made tweaks and changes along the way. And for some people, those are controversial. But ultimately, that's a masterwork that you can still go ride and enjoy. So for me, it's not unlike going to a museum and just standing in front of the Rembrandt and taking it all in.
Okay, Bradley, any parting words for the folks who want to do what you do?
Make absolutely sure you love theme parks. And you have to love theme parks, not just particular companies' IPs.
Right.
You know, loving the IPs and bringing that passion, that's super helpful. But this is a frustrating job. It is a really challenging job. The books on Imagineering and theme park design in general are all truthful, but they are also presenting everything in the best possible light. The day-to-day of this job is a grind.
Right.
It's a job. So you have to love it. And I know tons of people that do great work in our industry that eventually leave because they just don't love it enough. They love animation more, or they're more passionate about other things. If you can't replenish your passion for theme parks over and over and over again, it's not worth it. It's better to be a fan. And then the other thing to remember is just having ideas doesn't get you anywhere unless you are excellent at communicating those ideas. The people that are tasked with the highest level ideation passes are excellent writers and excellent sketch artists. Just get as good at that as you possibly can. Embrace the duality of this. So if you want to be the idea person, you want to work in creative, that's great. But you've got to have a skill that will make you of use to the team. And then remember that everything is a team. They very purposefully don't have credits in this industry. At the end of a movie, the credits roll. At the end of a television show, the credits roll. At the end of a video game, the credits roll. At the end of a ride, there's no credits. Be aware that your work is probably not going to get seen by many people. My social media game is not great because the vast majority of my energy goes into producing stuff that I am contractually obligated to never show anyone ever. Right? It doesn't belong to me. I'm not allowed to show it. If somebody else shows it somewhere along the line, then I can start showing it. But the bulk of what I do will remain secret for a long time.
Yeah.
And you got to be okay with that. You know, the work we do is fun and rewarding, but taxing and hard and frequently creditless. Theme park design is very small. It's a very tiny corner of Hollywood, and it's kind of weird, but it is intoxicating, and you will love it. You will put up with all of the craziness to keep working on stuff. You will nourish yourself with your work. You know, even if this project doesn't go anywhere, you will look back on the effort and the collaboration and just feel really good about what you were able to pull off. And most of the time you will be proud. You will be proud of what you've done. You will look back on all of it fondly, and you will replenish your ability to keep going simply by working. And that's a gift. Not everybody gets to live that life.
And on that note, let's play along. Go now to chrisoatley.com/CB1. That's C as in Chris, B as in Bradley, and the number 1. And tell me what your favorite theme park attraction is and why. Of course, I'll be sure to share my own. Again, that's chrisoatley.com/CB1. And before I go, a quick reminder to connect with me on Instagram. The link is chrisoatley.com/IG. That link will redirect you to my profile, where you can click follow, turn on post notifications, and find my new visual storytelling tutorials. And until next time, my friends, stay strong and stay close. Okay, favorite ride.
Favorite ride. It's definitely Pirates of the Caribbean,
Mm-hmm.
but it may also be the motorboat cruise through Gummy Glen. I grew up in Arizona, and the thing you do in the 80s and 90s in Arizona when it's time to go on vacation is go over to Disneyland.
Mm-hmm.
And so my family would all pile in the station wagon and drive over to Disneyland.
Which is what, like an 8-hour drive?
Yeah, in a pink station wagon from the 1980s. Yeah,
That's awesome.
It was a journey. I remember one time we did that trip, and my grandmother and I sat in the back seat and read Calvin and Hobbes, the books, the smaller sort of anthology books that they had at the time. We read those the whole way and just made ourselves laugh and laugh and laugh. And then we get to Disneyland, and she and I get in the line for the motorboat cruise. And so she and I get in this boat, and we're driving around, and it is phenomenally boring ride. And at the time, they had put do you remember the Gummy Bears TV show? They had put a Gummy Bears, that's it. They had put a Gummy Bears overlay, like a cheap Gummy Bears overlay over this motorboat cruise ride, right? And then there's these cardboard cutouts of the Gummy Bears sort of like sticking their heads out of the bushes or whatever. I think that thing's on. Yeah, it's on YouTube. You can go look that thing up, and that was a very special little section.
Not exactly a highlight of Disneyland history.
No, it wasn't up for very long. And then closed forever, and I don't even think you can see where the ride used to be anymore. But my grandmother and I, we rode around on that thing, making each other laugh so hard. You know, they had a steering wheel on it, and the steering wheel was connected to like nothing. Imagine this. You've got an 11-year-old who's obsessed with like Batman,
mm-hmm.
turning the wheel of this car, and you've got a 65-year-old woman with the white puffball hair
uh-huh.
yelling at him,
mm-hmm.
"Turn the damn wheel, Christopher! Turn the damn wheel!" And they both think it's the funniest thing that has ever happened in all of humanity.
Right, yeah.
We were crying laughing getting off of this ride. It was a way of connecting that is truly special and has stayed with me ever since. And interaction taught me two lessons. One, you can have fun with anybody, right? It doesn't matter how old they are, how young they are, whatever. You can figure out a way to have fun with everybody. And two, theme parks are magical
mm-hmm.
in that they give people permission to have that kind of fun.
Yeah, right.
The theme park had given us sort of permission to entertain each other in a way that, you know, we wouldn't necessarily have found if we were just, you know, at another Easter cookout or whatever, you know? My take on theme parks is we're making something that families or just groups of people, whoever your chosen family is at that particular moment, can have fun with.
Yeah.